We've got Rangers, we've got Senators, and we've got a very special crossover episode with Locked On Sens. We are discussing a strong start to the season for the Senators, the struggles of Mika Zibanejad, and of course, we are making predictions for tonight's game.
You're Locked On the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, Blue Shirts fans, to episode number 1173 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, John Chick. So I want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. And today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you will get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And we are, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So, yeah, like I said, very special crossover edition between myself and Ross Levitan of Locked On Ottawa Senators. Going to go ahead, just jump right into it here today. Enjoy. All right, so with no further ado, let's go ahead and welcome our very good friend, Ross Levitan from Locked On Ottawa Senators for this very special Locked On Rangers, Locked On Senators crossover edition here today. And Ross, we were talking for a minute before we hit record here, but one of the things that I definitely want to ask you right off the bat here is the chances of the Ottawa Senators potentially ending their playoff drought. I believe 2017 was the last time. They're 5-4 to start the season. Man, how are you feeling so far? And can this be a playoff team this year?
I'm guilty of drinking the Kool-Aid every single year, John, and appreciate you having me on. Funny enough, the last series the Sens won was against your New York Rangers. You guys have played in how many playoff series since then? Way more. Way more. And you guys got to conference finals. It's been obviously two different styles of rebuilds. We don't have the draw in Ottawa that Manhattan has and getting Adam Fox and Artemi Panarin, those rebuild speeder-uppers, if I will. But with Ottawa, it was a huge step back last year. They got to within 6 points of the playoffs 2 seasons ago, and then their star players all kind of stagnated. Most notably, Tim Stützle went from 39 to 18 goals. Now he seems like he's all the way back, coming off a 4-point night against the St. Louis Blues. He's up at 14 points, which is, I believe, tied for 7th or 8th in the National Hockey League. So those are signs that the team is starting to kind of get back to the level we knew their top-end talent could get to. But there's some great storylines around the Sens team, most notably getting Linus Ullmark, not only trading for him, but then getting him to commit to the organization for 4 more years before really playing a regular season game. There's some risk. There's no question about that. And Ottawa's taken 2 big swings on goalie contracts in Matt Murray and Joonas Korpisalo. Neither have worked, but neither of them had a Vezina either. So you look at Linus Ullmark as probably the most sure bet they could have made. And I didn't realize, you obviously see the Vezina, you see him play with Jeremy Swayman. The Boston Bruins have so much success in the regular season, but I didn't know what kind of leader Linus Ullmark is. He's really taken kind of the front and center stage of talking with the media every day. And he went through a bit of a strain and missed a few games early in the season, but he's coming off his best performance, second best, I'd say, home opener. He's unbelievable against Florida. And then now coming off a big win against the Blues. So I think that, if I'm saying why would the Sens make the playoffs, it's the core players taking another step forward and then having a legitimate number 1 goalie. Ottawa was 30th in the league in goals saved above expected last year. They really just could not buy a save. And I know it sounds like an excuse, but it's so deflating at times. So that's the biggest reason I think why Ottawa could make a push.
No, it's huge. And just hearing you describe all that, it just kind of reminds me and probably a lot of other Ranger fans as well of just how spoiled we've been over the years. Igor Shesterkin for the past half decade, Henrik Lundqvist for about 15 years before that. And right from one to the other, like there wasn't even a little period in there where we didn't know who our goalie was going to be. So it's something that you definitely should not take for granted. I wanted to ask you about Ullmark. You touched on him there, obviously, so we might as well just jump right into it. Obviously, the trade with Boston, you bring him in, you get him to sign the extension. It sounds like you were on board with this from the beginning, right? And I mean, to me, it made all the sense in the world because, like you said, the Senators have been killed by their goaltending, and here comes somebody that, to your point, has a Vezina and has been one of, I would say, at least a top 10 goalie for the past couple of years here. So, just were you on board with this right from the start?
Yeah, we actually, one of our hot takes in our preseason episode, Pilsy said by Christmas they'll get an extension done, and the very next day they announced the signing. So yeah, we're on board with it, and we understand there is a bit of risk. He'd never started more than 48 games in a season, and if he's going to be a legit $8.25 million cap hit type goalie, you got to be a 55, 65 game starter and a guy who's going to carry the mail, probably closer to 55, but you got to get the majority of the start. So he hasn't had that yet. There's been that strain, and it lingered. He played the game against Vegas last Friday, and then was mysteriously not in the lineup against Colorado. He ended up actually going in twice. I don't know if you saw this. This is kind of the goofiest play. They were hemmed in their own zone, and we thought it was just a vet move from Anton Forsberg because they iced the puck so they couldn't change. And he went to the bench for repairs, and we're like, okay, vet move. Okay, get the guys a little gas. Okay. And then all of a sudden, Ullmark had to come in because they had to fix his skate. So they fix his skate, and then Ullmark leaves, had to make a big save, then leaves. Forsberg goes back, but the skate wasn't fixed. So he had to leave again, and Ullmark had to come back in the game and make another couple saves. It was comedy. But besides that, to get to the point, Ullmark just provides a stability that this young core hasn't seen before, especially on defense. Their bottom pair, Tyler Kleven and Jacob Bernard-Docker, are 22 and 24 years old, respectively, with probably a total of 100 games, if that, in the NHL. They just needed a stabilizer and this young core to have a guy where it's like, if I make one mistake, it's not going to be in the back of the net. And I think it's allowed the team to play more freely in front of them.
Hearing you say that, it's almost an exact replica of Igor Shesterkin the year that he won the Vezina, when he's putting up those video game numbers. And most people that year didn't even have the Rangers in the playoffs. They end up in the Eastern Conference Final. It was the same thing because they had such a young team, a lot of inexperienced D-men. And to your point, I think that does take a certain amount of weight off their shoulders. And you know what? Hey, I don't have to be perfect out here because this guy's got our back. Igor was unbelievable in that respect that year. One more question about Ullmark, man. Were you ready for a goalie fight in the last one? Because that was looking like something might go down there. It was a lopsided game, and him and Binnington going at it.
Yeah, well, Binnington's a guy who's no stranger to being in the face of the opposition and kind of being a bit of a hero out there. And I just think, how dumb would Linus Ullmark have had to be to take him up on that? I mentioned he was coming off a strain, like he's just back from injury. The worst thing that he could have done was go down there, and it would have been entertaining for the fans, of course. And if you're in the building, you're like, let's go. But I think if you take a step back in a 7-1 game against a non-conference opponent, like, it's not even a rival. Like, if it was Sens Habs, Sens Leafs, like, sure, let's get this party started. But against the Blues on a Tuesday night in October, we don't need our starting goalie taking on a hothead at the other end. What Lena said after the game is that it was all an act, and that Brady Tkachuk, of all people, can take care of himself. So he didn't feel the need to sprint down there and help out Brady.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Although, Binnington's been one of those guys that, like you said, he's always in the middle of that kind of stuff.
Always.
And sooner or later, man, he's going to get his comeuppance. I don't know if it's going to be Ullmark, but sooner or later, he's going to bite off a little more than he can chew out there.
Well, Ullmark, funny enough that he's playing and talking about defending Brady, because he almost got in a full fight with Matthew Tkachuk 2 years ago in the playoffs. He was helmet off, and he was ready to go there. So he is feisty. He scored a goal. Why not add a fight to his resume as well as a goalie? So I think one day we will see Linus drop the gloves, and he's a sneaky, humongous goalie. I think he's about 6'4", and I think he can handle his own. And Ottawa's no stranger to goalies that can chuck him. Ray Emery came up with the Ottawa Senators, and he obviously had that famous fight where he took on not only Marty Biron, but then Andrew Peters, the enforcer of the Buffalo Sabres, during a line brawl back in the day. So we love it here as fans. We also saw, and if anyone wants to Google this one or YouTube it, it's Yanni Erme fighting Felix Potvin with the LA Kings. His blocker wouldn't come off, and he's at the bench trying to punch with one arm, and his other arm's on the bench, and 3 guys are trying to pull it off. It's comedy too. So yeah, just another aside there. But John, Linus Ullmark does not have to fight in a 7-1 game.
I hear you, bro. I hear you. I'm going to end up going down a rabbit hole watching all these old school hockey fights once we're done here, Ross. But maybe in the off season at some point, like you, me, Pillsy, we sit down, we do a watch party of just watching old hockey fights. Why not?
Well, I got a new-ish fight that your listeners can see, because tomorrow night or tonight on Friday, Zach Ostapchuk's going to be in the lineup for the Ottawa Senators. He's a rookie that was a second-round pick in 2021, and him and Matt Rempe had an unbelievable fight in junior, when Rempe was playing with the Seattle Thunderbirds and Ostapchuk was with the Vancouver Giants. You can find that one online too. It's 2 big boys going at it in the Western League.
Yeah, Rempe was going at it with McElrath the other night, and all indications seem to be that he'll be back in the lineup for the Senators game, but we'll see how it goes. One more question I got to ask you about the Senators, specifically pertaining to their offseason and kind of a big move that they made. They traded away Jacob Chychrun. I mean, I guess it just didn't really work out. He goes to the Capitals in exchange for Nick Jensen and a 2026 third rounder. Ranger fans, a couple of them kind of were interested in Chychrun. I didn't really get it, especially when you consider the cap hit, but just your thoughts on that trade and it just not really ever seeming to really click with him in Ottawa.
It was, as my friend Mark Mathod, who was in that series the last time the Sens and Rangers played, he says it was a square hole, round peg. And it just was never a fit because Ottawa's left side of their D-core is Thomas Chabot and Jake Sanderson. And Jake Sanderson is the number one. There's no question about it at this point now, 22 years old. He's really taken a huge step forward in his development. But they're just like, they sold this idea that Chychrun could play the right side, but it just didn't work. Him and Thomas Chabot were paired together, and it was a mess in their own zone. Chychrun himself, you can tell he's got a ton of talent. He actually set tied his career high in points with Ottawa at 41 last year. He's a goal scorer. He's double-digit goals every year. But in his own zone and some of the decisions he was making, you're just like, what are we doing? And I think it also kind of put his goalies in a bad spot. It's what came first, chicken or the egg, the bad goaltending or the bad defense in front of him. So Steve Stais, a steady defenseman in his day as well, 1,000 games in the National Hockey League with Vancouver and Edmonton, predominantly with a couple other teams. I think he played for the Islanders actually too. You put him in a position where he wanted to balance the D-core. So on paper, Chychrun is definitely the more high ceiling, high event player. But what they wanted was to balance Thomas Chabot with a defensive defenseman who can skate. And Nick Jensen has been all that and more. He's actually got 5 assists too in 9 games. So we weren't expecting any offense from him. And he has like one shift a game where he turns into this puck moving all over the ice defenseman. But overall, they just wanted him to be more steady. Jacob Chychrun was dash 30 last year at even strength. And Nick Jensen already +6 in the early going. So yeah, on paper, it is lopsided towards the Washington Capitals, who I'm sure would make that trade again based on their start. But the fit of Nick Jensen on this D-core is something that the Sens really needed.
Sounds good. I mean, it sounds like the trade's working out pretty nicely for you guys thus far. And we're going to keep everything rolling here on this crossover edition in just a second. I know, Ross, you're going to have a couple of questions about the Rangers for me, so we'll get to that. Mika Zibanejad and a whole bunch of other stuff in just a second. All right, we just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On Rangers and Locked On Senators is brought to you by Gametime. Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even faster and even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you do not have to waste time searching through thousands and thousands of tickets. You've got Gametime Picks. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc., all in pricing. Toggling this feature shows the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout, and the lowest price guarantee or Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? It is game time. All right, we'll go ahead and keep this special crossover edition here rolling between Locked On Rangers and Locked On Senators. So, Ross, I asked you a couple questions about the Senators. Fire away, man. What do you got for me for the Rangers?
Well, first, I'll start with a little trivia. Do you know what happened the last Friday night the Sens and Rangers played at MSG?
The last Friday night, the Rangers and is this going to be something from the playoff series where you guys eliminated us?
No. I wouldn't do that. I already brought it up twice. That was plenty. That was the game where Brady Tkachuk and Jacob Trouba fought at center ice at MSG. That happened to be a Friday night, and that's still something that's talked about in this market because obviously the iconic Madison Square Garden is something that the Senators truly appreciate being able to go to. Brady Tkachuk in an interview this summer mentioned this is his favorite road barn to play in, and it shows with the numbers. I believe Brady Tkachuk, Pilsy mentioned it on Locked On Sens today. I think he's got 20 points in 16 career games against the Rangers. So it's something that he will be up for sure. So we'll look for that in tonight's game. And I'm expecting it to be a high scoring affair, John. We got the Senators third in the league in goals for per game, and the Rangers are fourth in goals per game. So I'm excited to see that. But one thing I noticed, I'm looking for former Sens, hashtag Sens abroad. Mika Zibanejad, man. It seems like he's the whipping boy. I search him up on Twitter, and all I'm seeing is hate for Mika. What's going on there?
Yeah, it's tough, man. I mean, when you look at just the stats and the numbers that he's put up thus far, it's not really that bad. It's respectable. And I don't want to make it sound like he's done nothing, but even I had to critique Mika, I believe it was on the most recent episode of Locked On Rangers, because there's just a certain lethargy to his game right now where it just doesn't seem like he's engaged. He's not getting in there on the forecheck. He's just not competing the way that he could. I think a really good example of this is in the last game against the Capitals. And the Rangers didn't play great, and there was plenty of blame to go around. It wasn't just Mika. Outside of the Filipino line, I don't think anybody, and Igor had a good game too. But outside of that, I don't think anybody really played all that well. But, they're rushing up the ice. It's 2-on-2. It's not like a golden scoring opportunity. But, he's one-on-one with Van Riemsdyk, who, solid defenseman, but not a Norris candidate. And instead of challenging him, trying to get through him, trying to get by him, trying to do something, maybe crisscross with Kreider on the way to the net, he just kind of veers off to the side and he's along the boards, and then half-hearted pass attempt deflects, goes out of play. And again, it's not one of those things that you're going to obsess over forever or oh my God, his career is over because of this. But it's just man, come on, you're Mika Zibanejad. You're so much better than this. He, a couple of years ago, would have been trying to pull out all kinds of moves, doing anything he could to get to the net, create some kind of a scoring opportunity. So again, that play's not the end of the world, but I think it's just kind of a microcosm of what's going on right now. Maybe part of it is the fact that they do have another new right winger on that line. This time it's Riley Smith. So obviously they, maybe need a little bit of time to gel. But yeah, man, I mean, that line and Mika Zibanejad in particular have not exactly hit the ground running this year. And initially, there was kind of a joke on Rangers Twitter about how, the Mika line's now the third line. I'm not really sure it's a joke at this point because the Filipino line has been fantastic. And we know the Panarin line is the most dangerous line for the Rangers. So yeah, that's kind of where things are, man. And obviously, Mika's a slow starter, so he can obviously pick it up, but hopefully sooner rather than later.
And he's got one of those long strides too. And sometimes those guys look like they're going even slower than maybe they actually are on the ice. So I'm hoping it works out. I was always a big fan of Mika Zibanejad, and the fact that Ottawa gave up a second rounder in that trade is just the cherry on top. It truly is one of the worst trades in franchise history this summer. Every year we do Ring of Honor drafts where we talk about different topics and draft our own teams. And in the worst trades in Sens history, I believe that was at number 2, right after the Mark Stone trade to Vegas. That's how impactful Mika Zibanejad, it felt like he could be in Ottawa, and then it was just cut short being traded so young. So I'm hoping Mika can figure it out here and get himself back into the good grace. I mean, 2 years ago, he had 91 points. There's a great player in there. Even got Selke votes for a couple of years, a couple votes at least, finishing 15th and 16th in voting. But I'm hopeful that things turn around there. Another lightning rod for criticisms, Jacob Trouba. He had that one big hit against the Habs, but has he kind of figured out where the line is? Does it seem like a little more?
I mean, thus far, you would have to say yes, but then again, we are only about, 9 or 10 games into the season, whatever it is, so you never really know. I mean, it kind of feels like, at Trouba, you're always kind of waiting for that other shoe to drop, whether it's, a questionable hit or a dip in play that seems to happen at least a couple of times a season for him. But overall, he's mostly stayed out of the crosshairs from Ranger fans thus far this season. I feel like, he's one of those guys, I don't know that he's ever going to live up to his price tag of $8 million per season, but you saw what he did in the playoffs last year. It just wasn't good enough. And it's he's got to be better than this. And thus far this season, he has been. He's playing his typical brand of, hard-hitting hockey. He's kind of earned his way back into the top 4, I believe, as far as the defensemen are concerned. And we'll see how it goes. He's had a little bit of a revolving door as far as his defense partner. We've seen him with Schneider. We've seen him with Miller. And we've seen him with Lindgren at different times. And we're only 9 or 10 games in here. So we'll see how it goes. But, fingers crossed that he can at least be a steady defenseman, if not, certainly an all-star caliber defenseman.
Something else that just amazes me about this team is their contract situation. So much was made on your show as well about Igor Shesterkin and the alleged contract offer and turning it down. And then you look even beyond that, there's some notable players here that are coming up for a new contract. Ryan Lindgren, you mentioned, he's as dependable as a defenseman as it gets. Keandre Miller is going to be a restricted free agent after this year. I know they lock up Alexis Lafreniere. That's a big-time contract that they got for him. But how do you think they handle having 2 years with Panarin at 11.6 and having both their goalies, and Jonathan Quick, talk about a resurgence for him. He's been awesome, it seems like, for the Rangers. How do you think they handle this going through the rest of the year and beyond.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because, there's some UFAs, there's some RFAs at the end of the year, and we keep thinking as Ranger fans that, okay, this is going to be the offseason where this team really has to make a lot of tough decisions. And it's kind of felt that way the last couple of years. But then, when the offseason comes and goes and they largely return mostly the same group of players. I mean, a couple guys coming and going, but nobody that's irreplaceable. I think this upcoming offseason, though, this is really the one because Panarin's still under contract, $11.6 million. Trouba's still under contract, $8 million. They'll both be in the last year of their deals. And you've got, obviously Igor, that's the big one, still at UFA, turned down an offer that would have made him the highest paid goalie in the history of the sport, unfortunately. So, and a lot of people feel a lot of different ways about that. But then, to your point, you've got Miller's an RFA, Lindgren's a UFA. I mean, if I was going to predict something, I would say they probably let Lindgren walk, which kills me because he's one of my favorite players. He just, wears his heart on his sleeve every single game. He takes a beating out there and does it with no complaints. But, you're starting to see Victor Mancini start to emerge on the Ranger blue line. And with Lindgren, there's injury issues. And I think there's also the belief that he basically has kind of hit his ceiling. Now, he is a very good, very solid NHL defenseman, but there's nothing about him that's like, oh, this guy's going to be a superstar. You know what I mean? He's kind of one of those players. So it sucks. I don't think they necessarily want to lose him, but like I was just saying, there's tough decisions to be made, and I just get the feeling that he's going to be a cap casualty. I don't think they would trade him in season because some people have talked about that. I think being a cup contender, you want to hang on to your guys. But after this season comes and goes, I could see him walking, and that's going to be kind of a sad day when that happens. At least for me. I don't know about other Ranger fans.
So with that, you look at some of their players coming up in the system, and it feels like it's a lot heavier up front than on the back end. Like, did any part of you maybe hope that they give less money up front so they can keep the decor intact with Lindgren and Miller?
Not really, because there's not really a contract that they've given out to their forwards that, when they did it, I was like, oh my God, no, don't do that. Kreider, that 1 year, the Rangers weren't in contention. He's in the last year of his deal. They're coming up on the trade deadline. Got to either trade him or extend him. It's got to be one or the other. They got a deal done at the 0 hour. And some people were like, they're rebuilding. They should have traded him. And it's like, well, dude, you need a couple of veterans in there. And he was only in his mid-20s at the time. So I like that. I mean, Panarin's Panarin. I think he's earned just about every dime that he's gotten. And even Mika, he's under fire right now, for his level of production at $8.5 million per season. But when it happened, I was all about that too, because he was looking like somebody that was flirting with being, a top 10 forward in the league. I don't know that he's at that level now. In fact, I know that he's not. But yeah, man, and the Lafreniere deal looks great to me. So there's nothing really that they did at the time, at least, where I looked at it and said, oh, bad move. We're going to regret this. So overall, I don't have too many issues with any of the contracts that they've given out. And even somebody like Trocheck, who they got from the Canes, another guy that's been worth every penny.
Oh man, I love the Rangers. I picked them 2 years in a row to win the cup, and now I'm kind of like once bitten or twice bitten, and now I'm shy about picking them again. But they just have so much talent up and down the lineup. And you mentioned Lafreniere, and when we look back that 2020 draft, Ottawa had 3 and 5, so you expect them to get 2 great players. But for the Rangers to come out of that with Lafreniere and Braden Schneider, who I'm a huge fan of as well, I think these two franchises certainly benefited from that draft just as much, if not more, than everybody else.
Yeah, for sure. And one thing I love about that draft, too, is that the Rangers in the first round traded up to get in front of the Devils, who then took a defenseman that honestly, at this point, maybe the name would ring a bell, but I'm not even sure. He's played a couple of NHL games, I think. But Braden Schneider, this dude's a rock-solid defenseman. So to move up and get a defenseman, especially when it's entirely possible your division rival was about to take him, that's awesome. And that was a big-time move by the Rangers there for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome, too. And yeah, I'm looking at all the names. This was a great draft class top to bottom. And the fact that, Lafreniere's kind of panned out after being stuck on the third line for the first year or so of his career, I think it's just awesome to see overall. So I'm happy with the guy we got at 3 there with Tim Stützle. And I know that whenever he plays LA and when he plays the Rangers, there's that little bit of hey, you didn't think I was good enough at the time. So let's see if I can put a move on here too. And his game has just developed so much. I know there's this unfair reputation going around that he's a diver and all that. And I think if his name was Tim Smith instead of Tim Stützle, I don't know if we'd have these same conversations. His soccer background, I think, and no, what really comes down to, and I know the Rangers have had these types of players too, where they're so dynamic, and when they cut, they move laterally, and they're going so fast that if you even get clipped, you're not only going down, but because you're moving sideways, you're going to go down like a ton of bricks. So it's something that Timmy is working on, and it's being stronger on his skates. But he had a great hit on Ryan McDonough a couple weekends ago against Tampa. Like, he is a physical player out there. So that's something to watch for in this game tonight. He's kind of the guy who you circle every night if you're the opposition when you look at the score at the lineup sheet. And 5 points in 7 games against the Rangers so far in his career. And I'm curious against LA, 8 points in 7 games against LA. So certainly knows the teams that passed on him. And it's just exciting to see the young talent. And I think the Rangers should even be able, I think, to kind of flip over once these players start aging out, because they do have that next wave coming, which is nice to see, led, of course, by Lafreniere.
Absolutely. So we're going to keep everything rolling in just a second. Ross and I are going to get into some matchups, some predictions, anything else that we feel like talking about that related to the Rangers and the Senators. So we will do all that fun stuff in just a second. All right, we just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On Rangers and Locked On Senators is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That is FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, so we'll go ahead and keep everything rolling here on this very special crossover episode. And Ross, we talked a little bit about, obviously, the big-time heavy hitters on the Ottawa Senators, but I think that's going to be a big-time matchup in this game here because we talked about the Mika line. They're struggling a little bit, and they're going to be up against, Tkachuk and Stützle quite a bit in this game, it would seem. And it looks like, if I'm not mistaken, looking at the depth chart, that Ridley Gregg is currently playing with the two of them. So just your thoughts on that matchup and certainly the Senators line. And I mean, Tkachuk and Stützle just both off to fantastic starts this season.
Yeah, they certainly are. Brady's got at least a point in 9 out of 10 games, 5 in his last 2 games, a 3-point night against Colorado, and then following it up with 2 goals. And those 2 goals actually put him 6th all-time in Sens history in goal scoring. And he's still 25, 26 years old. So awesome to see that. And funny you mentioned Ridley Gregg, another player from that 2020 draft class, the third of Ottawa's 3 first-round picks. And it's been a bit of a revolving door up there. Ottawa's unfortunately been dealing not only with injuries, but David Perron right now is away from the team for personal reasons. And with that, has opened up a spot in the top 6. At first, they tried Michael Amadio, Stanley Cup champ with Vegas a couple years ago, more of a depth-type player. But he's got a great stick, good defensively, so they kind of wanted a little bit of a defensive conscious on that line. It just wasn't working. He had no points in 5 games with those 2, and you need to be producing offense if you're going to keep up with the best players on the team. Then they tried, they tried Claude Giroux. Then they moved him down. They used Michael Amadio up there. They found a line that worked with Josh Norris, Drake Batherson, and Claude Giroux. That's actually been the Senators' best line as of late. But Ridley Gregg moving up there, he's a shift disturber, as we like to call him. He's in your face. You might remember if you listened to the slap shot in the empty net last year against the Toronto Maple Leafs, like, he is a pest of the mold of Nick Cousins, Brad Marchand, name your favorite pest there, and he's right in the mix. And people will start to realize that more and more. He's still just 22 years old and really establishing himself as an everyday NHL talent. Just 1 goal so far in 6 games this year. He also dealt with injury and missed 3 games a little bit earlier, but it's been the best it's been. And when you're coming off an 8-1 win, John, you don't touch anything. You just let the chips fall where they may. So I like the move stylistically. He's a defense-first guy, too, and can skate and keep up with Timmy and Brady. But those 2 that you mentioned, the 2 mainstays on that line, have been unbelievable so far this season. So it's just about finding somebody that can complement them.
Yeah, amen. And something else I got to ask you about, this is kind of an interesting matchup for this game, and it's early. So as far as like special teams rankings and special teams percentages, they're going to continue to jump all over the place for every team in the NHL. But right now, Ottawa Senators, number 2 power play in the league at 42.9%. The Rangers have the number 3 kill at 89.7%. So I got to ask about the Senators power play. I mean, I get the feeling that Stützle and Tkachuk are obviously involved there too, but this is a team that was 23rd in the power play last year. So obviously hop, skipping a leap forward this year. How are they getting it done on the man advantage?
I'll just credit Daniel Alfredsson, Sens legend, Hockey Hall of Famer. He's behind the bench now as an assistant coach, and he's helping run that power play with Mike Yeo, another former head coach in the league that's now an assistant with the Sens. I believe he's the associate coach, if I should say that correctly. So, yeah, not only is it the Timmies and the Bradys of the world, but their entire top unit. Mike Kelly with Sport Logique, he does a lot of work with the NHL Network. He put out what the most efficient power plays are in the National Hockey League in terms of specific units. And the one of Batherson, Stützle, Tkachuk, Norris, and Sanderson are averaging almost a full goal more per 20 minutes of ice time than the next best in the entire league. They are snapping it around, and they're scoring early in power plays too. They win the draw. It's pass in the back of the net. And Claude Giroux, being on the second unit, gives them a little bit more depth that maybe they didn't have before. He's also getting it done at 5-on-5, Giroux is, but Giroux's on a 7-game point streak right now with 11 points in his last 7 games. So the fact they're able to have that top unit, but then also be able to have this second unit that's caught lightning in a bottle, former Hobey Baker winner Adam Gaudette, who was in the minors last year, he's got 4 goals this year, half of them on the power play. So they're just finding ways to get it done, and it's impressive to watch. The puck movement specifically. Brady Tkachuk, after last game, though, did say he's hoping they can get cleaner zone entries. So if you're the Rangers penalty kill, just don't let them get set up because they have so many weapons. They've got the Josh Norris one-timer on the left side, then on the right side. Then on the left side, you got Timmy on his strong side. So he kind of works down low on the boards and moves up and kind of just creates a little bit of misdirection in the offensive zone. And then Sanderson's point shot gets through all the time. Brady in front of the net. And Drake Batherson's been awesome in the bumper. So having all those guys just know their roles has really helped it be because 2 years ago they were top 10 in power play. Last year, it just didn't make any sense. They could not score on the man advantage. So they're closer. I know you said regression, and it will hit. They're not going to finish at 42% on the year, but I do think that they can sustain one of the better power plays in the league.
For sure. And, the Rangers, they tend to be pretty aggressive on the penalty kill. I think that's something that helps them, and I think they're going to have to do the same thing here against the Senators. They're very good at pressuring the puck at the top of the zone, so I'm curious to see, how that's going to go when these two teams are matched up, or, maybe the Rangers can just stay out of the penalty box. That's not a bad strategy either. But, I figure we can go ahead, make a prediction for this game. I know you kind of hinted that you think this is going to be a little bit of a high-scoring game in this one, but final score, anybody to score a goal for the Senators, anybody get into a fight, anything you want to throw out there, Ross?
Well, with our friends over at FanDuel, I'm 3 games in a row now where I'm hammering Michael Amadio to get his first goal of the season. He had a great assist on Tuesday, so I'm sticking with that. Usually it's like plus 400, plus 500, so I throw a couple shekels on that just for fun. Brady Tkachuk always comes to play at MSG, though, so I'm thinking a multi-point night for Brady isn't out of the question. I'm going to go 5-4 Rangers win in overtime. I think Ottawa hasn't had an overtime loss yet. They're 2-0 in overtime so far this year. I think that if they can get a point, it would be a success on my kind of like chart of how we're doing games this year to try to see how they can make the playoffs. Obviously, the Rangers are an awesome team. They're playing at home. So I think Rangers in overtime is probably an optimistic outlook from my end. And I'll say, 5-4 in overtime.
As much as I want to say that this is going to be kind of a low-scoring game, just because, obviously both teams have great goalies. And on top of that, the Rangers were very leaky against the Capitals. I think it's the worst defensive game they've probably played pretty much all season. I get the feel, I'm kind of with you, man. I feel like this might be a little bit of a run and gun kind of a game. And I feel like, the final score in my head was 4-3 in favor of the Rangers. And as far as picks to click or whatever you want to call it here, I'm going to say Filipino ends up with a multi-point night. He can absolutely fly. And if it's going to be that kind of a game, I think you'll see him, maybe get some points off the rush. And with Mika Zibanejad being under fire lately, I feel like he does tend to put up good numbers against the Senators when he plays them.
I think I've got it here right up. I know it's over a point per game. I want to say he has 20 points in 16 games, which I think is what I said for Tkachuk. So maybe I was thinking about Mika here. 20 points in 16 games for Mika against the Senators. So, he loves playing Ottawa.
So I'll say that he scores a goal. And I can't remember. I think this is before we hit record, but we were talking about Mika. He hasn't scored on the power play yet. I think it comes on the power play.
Okay.
Mika can tee up one of those one-timers. One-timer's been a little off this season, but sooner or later, he's got to connect on one. I don't know if I'm just trying to speak this into existence, given that Mika has struggled a little bit. But either way, give me Mika Zibanejad scoring goal in this game.
And Brady at 16 points in 15 games against the Rangers. So still over a point per game, but I was just a little off on that. I was thinking of Mika's stats. So I like that, John. I'm excited about this game. I think it's a great test for Ottawa, who is actually, like, they've played every Stanley Cup champion since 2018 already this season. St. Louis on Tuesday. They had Tampa already. They had Florida. They had Vegas. They had Colorado. So the Rangers, no different. They're playing a class team, a team that's got expectations to go beyond just the regular season or even the President's Trophy that they actually clinched against Ottawa in that game at the end of last year. But Ottawa was so depleted. I don't even count that one. I'll just that was a mulligan game for the Senators, a little throwaway at the end of the year. One stat I'll leave you with, though, out of all rinks that the Senators have played more than 13 games at, everywhere, including at home, second best win percentage at Madison Square Garden.
That's interesting. I would not have guessed that, but hey, I mean, that's very impressive. You know, the Rangers have obviously, especially in recent history here, had some good teams. Yeah. So, and funny enough,
their best record is at Nassau Coliseum. So I don't know what's in the water in New York State, but maybe the Sens should play there more often.
Maybe, man. Maybe just move to New York. You know, you can have
No. We want to move to Ottawa. We want to move the rink downtown. It's in the middle of nowhere right now. They got to get
for what it's worth, man. I would love to see a game in Ottawa sooner or later. I think that'd be
buddy, come on. We're talking to Johnny Lazarus today on Locked On Sens, and he said, "Hey, if the Sens make playoffs, I'll come up for a game." So, hey, maybe there's a seat next to him on the plane. We'd love to have you anytime. It's a place where you need the games to be big. We always go back for the home opener, and we go back for the big games throughout the season because Pilsy and I'm from Ottawa, but don't live there right now. So we always make sure for the home opener, but playoffs are a whole other world everywhere in the league. But there's something about Canada. Like, I'm in Winnipeg right now. We obviously have the whiteout in the playoffs here. And it goes from a passion to a religion come playoff time up here.
No, I hear you, man. Even just watching on TV, you know, it does kind of come through the screen a little bit. And you can tell, man, very passionate fans and, on the edge of their seat and making noise, for the entire game. Most important question I'm going to ask you here, though, Ross. You're an expecting father.
Hey. I love that.
Sometime later this month, right?
Yeah.
And so the biggest question, man, I mean, exactly how much Ottawa Senators gear do you have picked out for your baby?
So much. Now, the wife's got a little Winnipeg Jets, a little sprinkled in there. But our friend Chris Michelli with Locked On Avalanche, he posted at the start of the season. It's so cool, and I really want to do this with my daughter as well. And it was like, I don't know if it's a kid's jersey or an adult one, but the baby is tiny in it. And then every year on opening night, he takes a photo with her in the jersey, and it's starting to fit. So over time, just showing the growth. So I think that's so cool.
That's cute, yeah.
I definitely have a regular size Sens jersey picked out for that standpoint, just for fun. And then, we got the onesie, we got the socks, we got everything. I'm probably going to try to sneak a little like decal or something in the room as well. The wife's got it all planned out though, so I'm going to have to sneak it in there. But no, so excited about that. I know you got about a 2.5 year head start on me, John, and I'll be ringing you up for some advice here and there too.
Hey, man.
I'll be here. It's obviously I'm sure there's lots of dads that are listening to this right now, and I'm just excited to join the club, man.
Absolutely. So, Ross, awesome talking some hockey here. Always a pleasure. Happy to do this whenever you want to in the future.
Awesome. Yeah, let's have a good one tonight between the two teams at MSG. And I'm so jealous you get to see games there all the time. Like that, I was just in the hey, when a score like that. That's one of the cool traditions in the National Hockey League. So even as a spectator watching on TV, there's just something special about the Rangers and MSG and in particular. So I'm excited for tonight's game. And then it's going to be a little while. We're next game between the two teams also at MSG on January 21st. So I don't know if I can wait that long before talking with you, John, but at the very least, we'll catch up right before that one.
Yeah, absolutely, man. That sounds good. And Ranger fans, Senator fans, thank you guys as always. And we'll see you next time.